Disruption Networks. Easy Radio. Disruption Networks.
The power of the internet brings us back yet together once again, people. How are you? It is EC Radio time. I am Z. We are live on all Disruption Network social media platforms. You can check us out on Facebook, Twitch, YouTube, Periscope, Twitter, all those social media platforms that you guys are very familiar with. Yeah, before we get anything, much love to my sponsors. Much love to my boy, Eddie Alsheimer, and his crew over at EJA Moving Services, the professional movers. When it's time to move and relocate, hit them up at ejamoving.com or hit them up at 315-335-0516, home of the free boxes. So when you hire EJA, they give you the free boxes. Not only do they give you the free boxes, but they pack them for you, and they'll bring them pretty much wherever you need to go. 315-335-0516. Also, big love to my boy, attorney Dave Longaretta, who's been keeping me out of trouble since the 90s. Give him a call today if you need legal help. 315-735-6162. Shout out to my peeps over at Utica Coffee. Wake the hell up. wakethehellup.com. And also, much love to the Saranac Brewery. My guest today served 30 years as Chief Human Resource Officer for Steve Wynn's gaming companies. He's helped such casinos get started, such as the Wynn, Mirage, Treasure Island, Bellagio, and so much more. Now he's the president of Strategic Development Worldwide, which is a consultant company that helps develop companies with high output. And he's a former Utica. Please welcome to the show, Mr. Arte Nathan. How are you, Arte? Great to see you, man. Thanks for coming in.
My pleasure, Z. Good to see you.
We had a little glitch yesterday, and I really appreciate you coming all the way down here to talk to me. This has been cool.
My pleasure.
We're looking forward to this.
Coming down to the big city.
The big city.
Yeah.
The big city of Utica, right?
Well, from where I'm coming, up in the Adirondacks, it's pretty remote in a lot of areas, and that's where we are. So coming down here it's an adventure. Yeah. I like doing it, though. It's nice to be back around.
Yeah. Now, where's your old stomping grounds? You grew up in Utica.
I did. I grew up in South Utica on Arlington Road.
Okay.
The Ridgewood Raiders. Back when I was a kid, we played baseball and football. We had a good time. It was a great neighborhood to grow up in.
Did you go to Proctor?
No, I went to Hugh R. Jones and then Hughes and then UFA.
Then UFA.
Yeah.
So you're a Titan.
Yes, I'm a Titan. That's right.
What was childhood like for you? Were you playing sports? What were you doing?
I don't know. I had a great childhood. Did a lot of different things. Didn't play any sports. I was always on the small side for sports in high school. And in a bunch of clubs and doing stuff like that, and then went off to college.
Yeah. Were you playing music as a kid?
I played in high school with a couple of local people. We played acoustic music and had a good time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who were some of your early musical influences?
Lee Guthrie and Peter, Paul and Mary, Phil Oakes, James Taylor. Growing up in the 50s and 60s, there was no limit to the music you could get exposed to. And I did, and most of us as kids did. And so you could really like any genre, and we did. We played a lot of different things.
You grew up in the Woodstock generation. Did you go to Woodstock?
I didn't go that summer. I was working. But, that was my generation.
Yeah. Yeah, you mentioned all those artists. I figured maybe you attended that festival.
No, I didn't get there. That was something else. But it was a brutal thing to go through weather-wise and crowd-wise. But still, you can watch it today, any day of the week. Somebody's playing that movie.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Michael Lang was really smart on having those camera operators run around that place. He knew he was losing a bunch of money on that, so he told those guys, get out there and start filming, because he was smart.
Well, it set the bar for concerts back then, that's for sure.
Indeed.
Man, that was something.
And festivals, if you notice nowadays, festivals are such a big thing.
Yep.
It's all because of Woodstock. So, and then you went off to college at Cornell University. How was it in Ithaca back in those days?
College in the mid-'60s was full of protests, and that was pretty interesting, against the war, against all kinds of things. I played in a band there, same thing. and enjoyed it. Ithaca's a great place to go to college. It's a beautiful area. There's a lot to do. Those were 4 fun years, and I'm glad I was there at that time. That's something I can remember fondly.
Ithaca's known right now for a rich music scene. Did it have a rich music scene back then as well?
Oof. All kinds of stuff. I mean, I couldn't name them if I had to, but from the Four Tops to Chuck Mangione to everything in between.
Do you get a chance to visit to Ithaca when you come back home?
I did for many years when I was working because I'd go back there to recruit.
Okay.
So, yeah, I was a frequent visitor back to Ithaca.
Yeah. Take a hike in one of the gorges.
Oh, yeah, go to Tuganic Falls, or the gorges on campus. It's a great area.
Gorgeous.
Yeah.
Absolute gorgeous. I got a chance to hike up a couple times this year, and it's just breathtaking.
Mm-hmm.
It is. You're one with the earth, that's for sure. So after Ithaca, take us through your journey. What happened after that?
Went to law school for a little while, didn't like it.
No.
Stopped doing that. Went to work for my father and his company here in Utica, scrap iron and steel business for almost a dozen years, and then got recruited to go into the gaming business.
You got recruited?
I did. They had an opening, and there was they were interviewing, and I went and interviewed for the job.
And where was your first gaming job?
First gaming job was director of personnel at the Golden Nugget.
Wow.
In Atlantic City. It was it was something. I'd never been in a casino before. I was just floored by what I saw. But for me, it was the back of the house. It was all the stuff going on, all the complexities of running what was more or less like a city. And I really enjoyed it. All the years, the 25 years I did it, it was a hoot.
How was Atlantic City back then?
Well, it's hard to say it was its heyday, but it was the first years. And they made a big impact. The regulatory issues held them back, and they never developed as a full-blown competitor to Las Vegas as somebody might have thought they would. But it wasn't a convention town like Las Vegas is.
Is that what separates Atlantic City from Vegas?
Interestingly, yes. And they had the convention hall, Miss America and all the stuff that they would put in there. But they never maximized it as a city. And it didn't grow the way they had thought. We were there for 5 years, and we got out, went back to Las Vegas then.
Uh-huh. And then, so did Golden Nugget just transfer you over to Vegas? Or?
Yeah.
Oh,
I was at the Golden Nugget, and I was on the team that opened the Mirage.
Yes.
And I was the third guy hired for that team, and it was something. A whole bunch of things nobody really knew how to do them because they'd never been done before. And we worked hard. We had a great team of people, and that was maybe the biggest thing most of us have done in our lives.
Yeah.
It's like going 0 to 60 or jumping out of a plane. I mean, you just can't believe that's me. I'm doing that.
Yeah. What was at the Mirage before it was built?
The Mirage, the Castaways was on that piece of land.
Okay.
And we demolished that. But most of that land I think it was owned by Howard Hughes. And they leased it to Caesars, and Caesars did a Grand Prix event on there and a couple of other car races. But nobody ever owned the land, and Mr. Wynn picked it up on the sly, I guess, and put together enough acreage to do the Mirage and Treasure Island on that site. And it was something. Nobody had ever done anything like that. And it made a big impact on Vegas, on tourism, on entertainment in general. It really revitalized Las Vegas. You asked if Atlantic City really competed, but they didn't really compete. But Las Vegas was like, well, what's going to happen here? And so they were more reticent than you would think they would have been back then. But Mirage kicked them in the ass, and everything exploded. And don't forget, Atlantic City, its heyday was 80 to 85, 86 in there, and Mirage opened up in 89. So, I mean, it rode the wave, and Las Vegas has never been the same, as you know.
What an amazing vision Steve Wynn had to come up with the volcano and just everything that he does.
Everything. The volcano, the pirate ships at Treasure Island, the dancing fountains at Bellagio, all the shows, the Cirque du Soleil. He found them on a flight home one day, refueled his plane, and while they were refueling, he went to see them. signed him up on the spot. And Cirque du Soleil from that day forward was the biggest thing ever. Siegfried and Roy were the biggest before them, and before that was Elvis. But to do Siegfried and Roy and then all the other things we did at Mirage and Wynn, it was fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely. What a vision that guy had. What's it like sitting in a meeting with him and just watching him get creative?
Well, you have to put on your seatbelt. I mean, things can go from thought to decision in the blink of an eye in a meeting like that, or they can drag on and you get buried in your lack of details. I mean, he was that detail-oriented. And so, but if you knew what you wanted to do and you had it together and you went in and talked to him, I mean, you'd hold on for sure because it would take off. And, I mean, I got to do things that I never would have expected my dreams could result in, honestly.
Did you know Steve Wynn in Utica, or
Yeah.
you did?
Yeah. My brother and he were really close friends growing up. Our camps were next door to one another up in Old Forge. And, I mean, they're my brother and Steve are a lot older than I am, 8 years. But that's a big thing when you're a kid. So to me, back then, they were like, whoa, those are the big kids. And you'd watch them and, whew, maybe I could be like that someday. But they were some hell on wheels. And Steve Wynn never stopped. He just kept going. And he's like a diesel going downhill. I mean, he just, bang, you got to hold on when you're working with him. I enjoyed it. It was a hellish 25 years because you were ready to drop dead every minute. But if you held on, you could do some good things.
Wow, amazing. What an amazing career. The guy, he revitalized Vegas single-handedly.
Yeah. And all of us. I mean, he gave us the reins to do crazy things in each of our areas in the company. And there's some extraordinary things that you asked if I go back to Cornell. I mean, for 12 or 13 years, I was the biggest recruiter at Cornell for the hospitality business, and I'd go back there and just have my fill of Cornellians, and we'd bring them back in a great training program that resulted over a 12-year span of, I think, 30 some odd presidents or GMs of casinos around the world, and a lot of other senior people. I mean, a great program, and the Wynns let me do that. They, start a school here to take these kids from college and graduating to the real world and put what they just learned to practical use, and it was something, man. That cool stuff like that I got to do as an HR guy, and I appreciate it.
You had the pick of the litter.
Yes is the answer.
One night that I remember very, very well is the night the dunes imploded, and it was the opening of Treasure Island. What are some of your memories of that evening?
Well, first off was the plume of smoke coming across the strip. We were sitting in the parking lot in front of Bally's.
That's where I was, too. I was in Bally's.
And I mean, just that parking lot, and we knew the routine, the captain was going to fire the shot and the dunes was going to go down. Mm-hmm. It was hokey. But when that thing went down, there hadn't been such a publicized implosion. The other implosions were pretty good along the way. There have been some spectacular ones. But Wynn's showmanship in and around that. And, I mean, the night that the Treasure Island opened up, that was the beginning of it. And then but that thing in front of Treasure Island with the boats, I mean, that was an outgrowth of the stunt that was the dunes. I mean, you said what was a meeting like? It went from we got to get rid of the dunes to that night of implosion to those pirate ships in front of and the whole theme around Treasure Island. It went from, that's a pretty good idea, to holy cow, hold on for this one. And again, I mean, building those ships and running those ships every night, I mean, that was a different kind of a street show than anybody had done. The volcano was something else. There was at least no people there, but the ships was something.
Yeah, and watching that legendary casino fall like it did, and like you said, the smoke. I remember I got to like the third floor, and you couldn't see after that. It just looked like a war zone.
Well, imagine if you were on the ground right there. They gave us special raincoats and masks and helmets and stuff, but you still got dusty.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure. It was what an amazing night that was, and I'll never ever forget that. What are some of the principles that you learned here in Utica that you took to Vegas with you? And what it is it about a Utican that can, because there's been a few executives from Utica that have made it in Las Vegas, not just you and Steve Wynn, but there's been a couple others, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of people that have made it around out of Utica and in Utica. Some big people in Utica. I think it's when you're growing up, you are exposed to such a diverse community. And so your friends and their families come from this very diverse community then and now, differently now than then, but still learning to get around in that kind of an environment. You got used to people. You had to figure out, because some people were different than other people and how you approached them or how you carried on with them. And so you learned a lot about life and getting along with people. And I mean, like I said, the Ridgewood Raiders, we had football games against other neighborhoods, and those other neighborhoods were equally as diverse as ours. And so you got to know people from those neighborhoods on that level. And so it became almost second nature that whoever you met in business, you were pretty good on your feet with them. And I thought that was a pretty good thing to learn here. The schools back then weren't bad. They forced you to think, and they pushed you to go to college. And, it was an okay experience. I think growing up in Utica also, because you were out and about, you weren't, well, I don't go to that neighborhood or I don't go in that part of the city. Here, you're all over town. And 4 seasons of the year. So I think people are pretty strong and resilient coming out of Utica. Long-windedly, that's my answer.
Great answer. That's true. We thick skin because we got to put up with winter for 6 months out of the year.
You're darn right you do.
It's definitely something that we have to. It's a reality here in upstate New York is winter.
Tell me.
And I think.
Tell me.
And
why do you think we left? You can put up with it for 30 or 40 years, and then you go, man, it's pretty cold. And, it's a long winter here. It's not so cold. It's just gray.
Yeah.
Vegas is the opposite of gray, as you know.
Yeah, but before we got on, you were saying your daughter was here talking about a gray day, and she was happy to see a gray day.
Ooh, yeah.
And, like, when we see gray days, it just gets us into, like, this little ball of depression.
Oh, yeah, 2 in a row, and you're like, oh, I can't stand this.
We're ready to snap.
But that is the allure of Vegas, because it's sunny and warm. I know the meteorologist on the local NBC station. And you say, hey, how you doing, Nate? And he says, sunny and warm. And that's all he ever says, 365 days a year. So that's Vegas. You're outdoors every day. Different. I mean, when we were growing up, we were outdoors every day here, too. And it was great. I mean, you got bundled up in the winter, and you had a wonderful time in the summer. There, you only get 2 seasons. It's hot, and then it's not hot. But it's always sunny.
Yeah. Nate has an easy job out there.
Oh, hot and sunny.
Hot and sunny. If you could go back in time and talk to Artie growing up in Ridgewood, what kind of advice would you give him?
Dream big. When you can sit and look at the sky around here, or you're just walking the streets at dusk and, that nice light, think about what you want to do. And the fact of the matter is you can do anything you want. I pinch myself, thinking that I grew up on Arlington Road and ended up in Las Vegas doing what I did. I can't believe it, but there's a lot of people, as you say, who've come through. I have a lot of guys and women and men that I went to high school with here, all of whom done some extraordinary things. When I go back to the reunions, I've had my 50th. It's interesting to see what everybody's done, and it's not like our parents who, grew up and stayed here and worked around here. Most of the people that I grew up with left. I remember Mayor Hanna saying, man, all the young people are leaving Utica, and how can we stop that? I think that's the problem in a lot of cities, certainly the Northeast cities. But also, as you said, there's a lot of people came out of here that did pretty good.
Yeah. I will tell you, nowadays, that's changed. We're starting to see more people stay in town.
I bet.
And open up businesses and doing a bunch of startups. And we're starting to see the millennials stay in town, and which is great because we need them. And we need to have this, injection of youth around here and do cool things in the community. And we're starting to see a lot of that. Like Utica's, have you noticed the revitalization going on?
Can't help it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a cyclical thing, and you're on a pretty good trajectory now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I like going down to Varick Street. And, I mean, there's a lot of cool places in and around Utica. So I think I like coming back every summer.
That's awesome. You said pinch me. You got a good pinch me moment for me? A good, I can't believe my career has taken me to this moment?
Well, the night that the Mirage opened, we didn't know what was going to happen. We had big dreams and big hopes. But still, you don't know because nobody had ever done it like that. Mm-hmm. And it had to be a huge opening to validate all that we did and all that we spent. That night, I said that morning, there's probably not going to be a dry eye among us tonight. And maybe for the rest of our lives, when we talk about that moment, there won't be many dry eyes. And it's true. It was one of those overwhelming moments to see 35,000 people running up the driveway at you. I mean, that was something else. But just the fact that you took on something that nobody'd done. You had to work as a really good team to get it done. And like any team activity, when you win something like that, you feel pretty good. I mean, that's a metaphor for what we did. So I mean, that's one of those moments. The first night the volcano went off, I mean, all kinds of silly things. But that was the proof that we could do something. And it touched us all. It really did.
Yeah. Vegas was always known as like a mob town.
They were just on their way out when I got there.
That's what I was going to ask.
Strange. I mean, a lot of stories, and a lot of guys working in and around the casinos came through that era. And they weren't wise guys themselves, but they certainly came through that era, and it molded them in their own ways. And so there were some really cool people. But there were some cool people at the Nugget, the Golden Nugget, who, had worked in Cuba, started in Toledo, worked in Cuba, came back from Cuba, worked around, and then went to Vegas after the war. And these guys would sit and talk, and we would listen. We wouldn't say a word.
Right.
And all kinds of tales. There were good things there. And I met a lot of people who worked through that period. I don't know that any of them were wise guys. Who knows?
Was it hard to wash Vegas of that stigmatism of being a mob town?
No.
No?
No, because it gave it a patina. And I think people, it's a mob town. We're going there. It's kind of bad. I can't go bad very often in my life. So that's what drove Vegas for many, many years. The mob ran a good town. The feds didn't think so because of the skimming, I suppose. But it was a very well-run industry. And then after, in the late 70s, it went real straight because the feds were there with all kinds of regulatory issues and audits. And, they knew the high-level crimes to watch out for, so there was no more of those. And I guess there was no more reason for the wise guys to be there if there were no more of those. So you had to learn how to do it from an auditing standpoint, from a transparency standpoint. It was very interesting to live through that period of it. So when people say, what was it like? For me, it was like the transition and putting in all the checks and balances and business practices and stuff like that you needed to be what people would consider a legitimate business. They were legitimate businesses before. They were run by, wise guys, but they were big businesses. We just had to put all the packaging back together. And it was fun. Oh, what those guys talking to them, you'd enjoy it.
I bet.
Yeah,
I know I would.
Listen, and why you can't get that. them on these podcasts. Probably not many of them left around.
I was just gonna say that most of them are dead.
But there are some. But it's a fun town because of that.
Yeah. Do you feel like the opening of the Mirage was when Vegas started to swing into more of a family atmosphere type?
Well, the Mirage wasn't it. The Mirage said that you could drive huge volumes.
Okay.
But then, well, are there sub volumes that you could eat off of as well? And the family business, the Disney business, people thought that was something. So about 3 years after Mirage opened, there was Excalibur.
Oh, right.
And then
MGM Grand.
MGM with the big theme there. And then Treasure Island. And all three of those were going to be family oriented. And it took about 6 months to realize that the heads in the beds had to be gamblers in order for this proposition to work. All right, they couldn't be kids. And so you had to unwind that sort of. And so there was a 3 or 4 year period there where people thought, well, maybe we could do that. But you couldn't mix them. You couldn't mix Disney with Bellagio. Something's wrong there.
Yeah. And now it's kind of more of a family atmosphere.
Well, no, it's a party atmosphere for everybody.
True.
Is what it is. It's not a family atmosphere. I mean, if I know people bring their 16 and 17-year-olds and the kids go wild at the pool and try to break the rules at night. But you want people that are 18 above. Pure and simple. And if we had our druthers, it'd be 24 and above. Because that's kind of the cutoff between crazy behavior and wild behavior.
Entertainment side of things in Vegas. How about some of your highlights?
Siegfried and Roy.
Yep.
Opening that show, nobody done anything like that. I mean, that was a $90 million stage, I think.
What?
Something stupid that thing was unbelievable. Well, the show itself was so mechanized and nobody had done that before. And so all the mechanizations, the Star Wars kinds of things on a stage, that started at the Siegfried and Roy show. And these guys were crazy enough to push the envelope themselves, and we backed them. And they would say, I'd like to have that dragon, that mechanized. Okay, we'd build a mechanized dragon. It was something. And the way they ran that show, that was kaboom. But then when we the first Cirque came behind Mirage while we were building Treasure Island, and then we did I forget the name of the show there, but those shows, and then the 1-0 at Bellagio, watching Cirque grow up was completely different than Siegfried and Roy, but equally as fascinating and challenging and demanding. So living through those two different entertainment things, and then later on when we started getting the headline entertainers, and the show would have to close, so you had to figure out how to cross-use the staging, and that staging was very specific for the show, certainly in and around water, and then to put Garth Brooks, so we had to build another theater for people like that.
Yeah.
But entertainment was, you grew up hearing about entertainment in Vegas, Elvis, and the Rat Pack and all that stuff, and everything packaged in the lounges in between. And to go there and actually see those people, and a lot of them are still playing.
Yeah.
Somehow, some way, and they're still good. It's like I saw Chubby Checker. We had him there once, and he was unbelievable. Now, I know that's hard to believe, but he put on one of the best shows last year that I've seen in a long time.
Last year,
I work with a big casino in Oklahoma that has a big event center. They have all kinds of the old acts, and fun to go see them because that's the circuit. But I've been around entertainment in things that I knew nothing about other than playing a guitar, singing folk music. But this was the stratosphere. This was off the charts, and everything in between. I would have loved working Broadway, in those companies, something like that, because I think this stuff is fascinating.
Yeah.
And I know that Siegfried and Roy show, I worked the stage 60 times. Oh, I was in the water a couple times. That was something else. Most of the Cirque shows, you just can't believe what's going on athletically, where Siegfried and Roy was mechanically. So,
A lot of moving parts.
a lot of moving parts in all situations.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I'm a big Beatles fan. How does a production like Love get developed?
Well, it is what can we do, Cirque du Soleil says, and they came up with this other genre around music or a performer. And they did it for Michael Jackson, and they did it for, it's just songs that you love, and then there's unbelievable acrobatics somehow choreographed sort of to the song. And you can't believe it because most of the Cirque shows, the music was indescribable. It was just gibberish out there, but it was sound. But for the Beatles and Michael Jackson, you're immersed in songs and music that you grew up with. And all of a sudden, there are these visuals that are completely different than anything else you might have imagined in the way of acrobatics. And they're interesting ways to do what Cirque does. And again, I loved working with those guys. Very creative. And where's it come from? A bunch of creative people sitting around a table going, what if? What could we? Well, and they just talk themselves into the ozone. And that's where these things, I think, come from.
A lot of inspiration sitting around those tables, huh?
Always. And that's the part of business and management that I loved. Because you'd sit there, and sometimes you'd feel like you were sitting there too long, but you never walked away feeling like that wasn't worth it. You were stretched and pulled, and, I mean, they were something, those meetings.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah. What are some of the ways you like to inspire people? Like, this is what you do right now with Strategic Worldwide. Like, how do you keep people motivated? And
look, you got to be positive, and you got to be flexible, and you have to be able to speak on your feet, because most of what we do is inspirational. And so your words have to move people. Your actions have to move people. You've got to be thinking, and that should be moving people. And that's how I always approached it. There were certain rules and tasks and things like that, but those were all in a playbook. And you practiced those, and you did those almost by rote. But what's in here? And so I always screened for attitude. Everybody else was looking, did they do this job before? Could they do this job? And I was always looking for attitude, because if somebody really was an optimist and cared a lot about, what they did and what they could be doing, you've got somebody you can train, you can mold, you can shape, and they'll do wonders for you if you leave them alone. I had fun doing things like that in my work all those years, and now I teach other companies how to do it, how to motivate, recognize, communicate, coach, stuff like that, and have a good time doing it still. Or I should say, I'm surprised people still listen to me.
Well, I mean, your record speaks for itself, my friend. The millions and millions of applications you've gone through, I can only imagine.
4 million. We took in 4 million applications to hire 100.
You know that number?
Yes.
I was just kidding.
No. I know it because the law of large numbers was our life for so many years. Like how many people worked at Bellagio? People would always say, well, how many people work here? And you'd say, well, guess. And they'd say, well, 800, maybe 1,500.
Thousands.
10,000, I would say. And they'd go, wow. But so I knew the size of the applicant pool every time we opened a hotel, and then what happened in between times. We had 3 million, closer to 4 million applications, and we hired 125,000 people in the years that I was there doing it. And it was a hoot, having to go through the large numbers to get to the right numbers. And that was my job primarily, to help people get through that, to hire them right, train them right, inspire and motivate them, and then let them work.
A little development there as well.
A lot of development, a lot of coaching.
Yeah.
That's all in the training. Yeah.
Man, that's a lot.
It was like running the community cup, MVCC here. that's what it was akin to. Number of classes each day, number of people going through different topics, but the same educational elements to all of them, where people have to learn something, so it has to be presented appropriately, and they have to practice appropriately. So, anyways, these were big training programs from the dishwasher to the general managers, and all the different programs to recruit them and then to train them and then to get them going. I enjoyed it. It was again, I got to pinch myself.
Yeah. You've met some interesting characters along the way, I bet.
Oh, unbelievable characters. Every which way. I mean, there's a lot of funny stories I tell. I don't know that they're for the, well,
No, you can go ahead.
I give a lot of,
This is very uncensored around here. So
I give a lot of speeches. And one day